Right off the bat, I'm going to start off with this. Matthew 24:4 says, "And Jesus answered and said to them, take heed that no one deceives you." We are warned many times, actually, about deception, about lies and things that are going to be coming in these last days. And when Jesus was on the Mount, he basically kicked it off by saying, do not be deceived. Be wary of deception. Take heed. Because in these last days, there's going to be deception coming in so strong that we're going to have this belief that what we think is 100% confirmed, obvious truth is actually not going to be truth. The only thing that we can hang on to in these times that we know is 100% truth, that we don't need to have any doubt about whatsoever, is the Bible. Everything else, even the stuff that we think is completely obvious, we need to understand that it could be a lie. We live in times where even the information we believe to be certain is not so. There's so many things happening today where this is interesting. It's a perspective of this something that I try and hold on to when I'm doing my rabbit hole digging and all my stuff like that, is I try to do it with no what's the word? I try and do it with no predetermined belief in my mind, except for scripture and prophecy, of course. That's the lens we need to look through everything. Don't try and find news and then fit it into prophecy. No, we need to look through prophecy into this stuff. But I try to go with no predetermined secular news outlet in my brain when I'm doing this stuff, because if I do that, I can tend to we all can tend to start altering the information that we get to fit the predetermined narrative that we have in our mind. So with that, there's so many things happening today where we base new information. So as we gather more news and information off of our old information that we already have predetermined in our mind, because we think that information is correct. So if we have a base foundation of secular news to base new information off of, that can then start determining what we think is truth when it could not be that way. I hope that makes sense. I hope I explain that well. Sometimes I'm terrible with it, but I hope that makes sense. So if we then understand that old information is actually deception, so if we take information that we thought was obviously true, that we thought was obviously true, and realize that it's actually false, we can find the truth instead. So we have to be able to alter our predetermined notion. Everything that follows begins to have a new meaning. So if you change what you think is actually truth, which is actually false information, the new information that you take in can then change what you originally thought it was. It's a very interesting way that the brain works. I'm not going to sit here and pretend like I'm a psychiatrist and I know how all that works, but I do find how the brain uses information and judges things very interesting. So I've done studies, I haven't personally done studies, but I've read studies on this stuff, and I find it very interesting how that works. So what am I babbling about? What am I talking about as far as this goes? Because I know a lot of people are like, okay, dude, what are you doing? Well, what am I talking about is there is a large scale. When I say large scale, I mean a worldwide belief. And this is not just the secular world. This is not just the news that's coming out. This is all types of media. This is even the prophecy guys that we watch. There is a large-scale worldwide belief that Russia and China are at war with the West and the global elite. If I told you there is no war, and remember, in Scripture it specifically says there will be wars and rumors of wars. Connect rumors of wars and deception together, you get something very interesting, an interesting combination. If I told you that there's actually no war and Russia and China are working with the West and the global elites, all that information that we had before with the understanding that they were enemies then changes. Everything changes. And I'll tell you what, if you go in with the notion that they're actually working together, all that information makes a whole lot more sense. That's what I'm talking about as far as the babbling goes. I believe that Russia and China aren't actually at war with the West and the global elites. I believe that they are working with them. And I'm going to show you why. I'm not going to give you everything because we would be here for 6 hours and then we would have to plan another one to go over it. But I'm going to give you some good information that I believe, if you're open to it, will get you thinking and even possibly change your mind. Like that Steven Crowder meme where he's sitting behind the table with the coffee mug. Change my mind. That's what I'm going to try and do. Well, I'm not going to try and change your mind. I'm just going to give you the information and let you decide for yourself. This idea that Russia and China are enemies with the West and the global elites, and there's a Cold War that's about to go hot due to unplanned. I'm not saying that there's not going to be a war, but what I'm saying, due to unplanned global conflict. What if it is planned? Is one of the driving forces to the information we gather and how we file it away in our brains. The great deceptive idea is one of global thinking. Like I just said, it's world thinking, it's the secular, it's the Christians, it's the prophecy watchers, it's everybody. Everybody has this idea that this is what's going on. And so here's a visual example of how this is working. And I don't know if you guys saw Tom's midweek update. You kind of stole my thunder on this one. It's all good, though. It's all good. Nothing wrong with that. Here's a little video of how this works.
Despite what you might be thinking, these two circles are not equal. I repeat, these two circles are not equal. One is in fact larger than the other. What I need you to do is determine which one that is. So, please raise your hand if you believe the blue circle is larger than the red. All right. Please raise your hand if you believe the red circle is larger than the blue. All right, very good. Now, before I said anything about these two circles, what was your first instinct? Equal, right? Because they look equal. And the reason why they look equal is because, in fact, they are equal. These two circles are identical. Yet I got just about every one of you to raise your hand and say that they're not. So what do we learn? That you can be manipulated like that to believe in something that goes against your natural instincts. Just imagine as a child you're taught that the blue circle is larger than the red. If you say it enough times, you convince yourself that's the truth. If you're told the lie enough times, it becomes part of your reality. And if enough people are taught that lie, that the blue circle is larger than the red, well, now it becomes part of the culture. And if that culture then passes that misinformation along to the next generation, well, now it becomes tradition.
It cut off, but it says now it becomes tradition. So, okay. One of the biggest, it's true. It's something that we like to repeat a lot, and I see it all over the place. If you repeat a lie enough times, it then becomes quote unquote truth. And we tend to apply that to things that we take in that may not sound right because we have a predetermined notion of it. But the thing is we don't apply that to the stuff that we have the predetermined notion to. Exactly what he's talking about. So if you continue something long enough, the next generation will go to believe that. So throughout many, many years, this lie of China and Russia versus the United States has spread and become common belief to pretty much everybody. It has. And as I've watched things unfold and watched the agendas of each country take shape, what they're saying, that belief that they're at war with each other, doesn't make sense. As I watch the reality actually unfold, and then you look at the agenda that the global elites are handing down, the belief that they're at war doesn't make sense. But the belief that they're working together in a theater of war, kind of like what we saw with World War I and World War II, it all makes a lot more sense. So that's what we're going to go over as far as this. So something I like to apply to this, and the most obvious one that I can give to give an example is Elon Musk. Elon Musk is the perfect example of say one thing but doing another. It's something that we've watched, and it's something that's quite obvious. So just like Musk, he bashes all these people. He bashes the WEF, he bashes the elites, he bashes the different sides of the government. He goes through all this stuff. At the same time that he's saying all of this, he's doing things that follow the exact agenda that those who are bashing are putting forward. He's working on the transhuman stuff. He's working on the electric car stuff. He's looking on the Internet of Things stuff. He's got the SpaceX program. He's got the brain chips. He's got all of these things that are going along with the exact same agenda that he's bashing. And so if you look at what China and Russia are doing, guess what? They're doing the exact same thing, just on a larger governmental scale. It's the exact same thing going on, and I'm going to show that to you as we go through this. We tend to look at the here and now and go with the flow of information, even though it's complete deception and we don't even realize it. It's time to tear down this curtain and reveal what's going on. So let's start here with the famous 8 predictions for the world in 2030. This is that famous WEF document. They also put out a little video clip. It comes from November 12th, 2016, and it's the thing that everybody quotes, the "you will own nothing and be happy." That's where this comes from. This comes from the 8 predictions. They say predictions. Well, we know this is the plan that they're putting forward, but that's where this comes from. But everybody focuses on the "you will own nothing and be happy" part, but they don't tend to look at the rest of the thing. Number three is very important. Again, this is the 8 predictions for the world in 2030 by the WEF. Number 3 on the list, again, tends to be ignored when it's quite interesting to discuss, and because it's not interesting. People, again, the "you will own nothing and you will be happy" is very interesting. We can see those things happening, and it's always something you can throw around. But the third one, again, not so interesting. What does it say? The WEF predicts in number 3 that the U.S. dominance is over, and we will have a handful of global powers. So in their predictions, it says U.S. dominance will be over and we'll have a handful of global powers. Kind of starting to see that a little bit right now, right? It goes on to say, and this is quoted straight from the document, there will be no single hegemonic force, but instead a handful of countries, the U.S., Russia, China, Germany, India, and Japan, chief among them. Interesting. It specifically mentions Russia and China. And it goes on to say, exhibiting semi-imperial tendencies. It goes on, power will be more widely distributed across non-state networks, and vast concurbations of megacities and their peripheries will exhibit ever greater influence. These megacities, we're kind of seeing that in these specific countries that they're talking about. I find it interesting that the 2 countries that seem to be labeled as the enemies of the West and the global elites, like the WEF, are specifically listed as part of the leaders of the New World Order being established by the very same people. So why would the WEF specifically list China and Russia as dominant global superpowers in their predictions if they're at war with them? I know, you might think, oh, well, that's fringe. Hang with me. It goes on to talk about nation states shoring up their territorial and digital borders, and they will face relentless climate change, migration, terrorism, inequality, and rapid technological change that will ratchet up anxiety, insecurity, populism, and authoritarianism. Well, what are we seeing right now that matches that list that they just gave? Well, we got the Russia and Ukraine thing going on. We got the China and Taiwan thing going on. We got the French protests that are happening. There's the Turkey and Greece thing that's been going on. There's the whole thing with the Dutch farmers in the Netherlands that's been happening. We've got the Australian Authority. We've got the Canadian Authority, and on and on and on. All these things going on globally all match everything that they're talking about as far as this goes. Okay, again, you might be thinking, fringe, so what? Let's just keep going. It goes on to say, others underestimated Western hubris and the greed of financial capitalism that contributed in 2008. 2008 is important, to one of the most serious political and economic crises since the Great Depression. Then says, these shocks alongside a vicious backlash against globalization. I'll say that again. These shocks alongside a vicious backlash against globalization. What are the things that we keep hearing so much about Russia and China? Oh, they're against globalization. Interesting. Enabled alternative models of governance to reassert themselves with China and Russia, but also other states in Europe. Again, it specifically mentions China and Russia. And all these things that it's listing that are happening right now, they're all happening right now. And it continues to mention China and Russia as being a part of this. All of this is sounding quite relative to what we've been seeing lately. And again, naming both China and Russia.